we start the story of the Megillah from Achashverosh's party. There are a few different opinions about who he is. One refers to him as this bloodthirsty king who goes and massacres millions of people. He loses in wars, he loses millions of his own soldiers, and he goes and he conquers the world. And we're familiar with it that it says that he takes out all of his riches to show in his party, and we change the tune in the Megillah, right? We change it to the tune of Eicha in the middle of the story of the party, right? So we're reading and we say, and he has this party, and then we change the tune and we go V'kelim mekelim shonim. That is different than the regular Esther tune. That is for Eicha, that we say on Tisha B'Av, and it shows us the sadness of that, what's happening over there. So the commentaries bring over there, and they write over there that he took out the utensils, the kelim, from the mikdash, from the temple, and he takes them out to show all that he has, either that he's or that he has. He takes out the menorah and he lights it as a candelabra. He takes out the things that were used on the mizbeach, on the altar, and he uses them as serving dishes, right? He's using everything that is holy as mundane as possible. And that is one of the opinions. One of the opinions looks at him as this great conqueror king who is violent and a lunatic and everything above. But everybody agrees that he didn't start from a royal family. It is very rare, if you look in most places, there are exceptions to it, but that the kingship is usually passed from father to son, from father to son. Every once in a while there's a rebellion and someone takes over, but in this specific case, we know from every source that there is that Achashverosh is not royalty. Achashverosh marries Vashti, and Vashti was the princess, and he becomes king. Who was he beforehand? One of two opinions. Either he was the general that led the battle and won, and therefore he won, and therefore he got the queen. Other opinions talk about him as really someone who has no accomplishments of his own, but rather married the queen and inherited all of the wealth and inherited all of the fame, but he himself is nothing. This we see in the first chapter, right in the beginning, with the interaction of Achashverosh and Vashti, right? Achashverosh comes and he says, I would like to show off everything that I have conquered. What is the biggest thing that he has conquered? His wife, right? Now, why is this such a big deal? Because he is not royalty and she is, which means showing her off is showing that he is now king. Now it says, bring her before me with a golden crown. Commentaries respond to it and nothing else, right? This is, again, it's a form of power and showing who he is. Vashti is the only one who is actually very much straight throughout this entire story, and she goes, absolutely not, right? I will not come. I won't be shown around, right? And he has her executed. Every other character in the entire Megillah is hiding something, okay? Now, right after this, we have a Haman gets elevated to becoming the prime minister. And who is Haman? Haman is a nobody who made his way up in the world by getting closer and closer and closer to royalty, making himself accessible to Achashverosh. And when he does this, he keeps on getting promoted until he becomes prime minister. Before that, right, where does he come from? Again, different commentaries talk about him from very, very different places, but he is very clearly not originally Persian, right? So when you're looking at Achashverosh's empire, he is the ruler of 127 countries. He is looking for diversity. This is what ultimately almost gets him killed when the two soldiers, the two king's guards, decide to execute him. Right? That they plot to kill him. Biktan and Teresh. They look and say, how can we get rid of him? They're talking a language that no one else speaks. So Achashverosh's mindset is bringing everybody in from all different places, trying to go with diversity is going to be key for unity. And everybody will love me when they see how much I have and how much I've done for them. And the response is, let's get rid of this crazy old king, right? Like, he is not a powerful person. Haman makes his way up, and he has several names throughout the Megillah. When he is next to Achashverosh in the first chapter, he is referred to as possibly one of two people, but very likely the person who told Achashverosh, you should have Vashti executed. Okay? So I'm going with the basis that we have that we've heard the story of the Megillah, right? And if I'm saying something that you haven't heard beforehand at all, please stop me because I'm guessing a little bit, and I know that we have a wide spectrum of backgrounds over here. Okay, so if anyone here has a question, please stop me, and again, I will just go wherever you're taking me tonight. The next step that we have, well, it's actually before Haman gets elevated, is Achashverosh needs a new wife, possibly also planned by Haman, who has a daughter, who he would like to marry Achashverosh, and that way get into the kingdom, right? For those of you who are familiar with the tales of Genghis Khan, one of the ways that Genghis got control over the majority of places had to do with the fact that he had many daughters, and he sent them to marry different kings and poison those kings and take control over their lands. This is not a new story. This is something that does happen quite often throughout history. So Haman does try to manipulate in that way as well. Esther, who her name is not Esther, what's her name? Hadassah, right? Her name is Hadassah, and it says it explicitly, right? Her name is Hadassah, but for all intents and purposes, we only ever refer to her as Esther. Esther comes from which word? Lastir, hide, okay? From the Hebrew word to hide. She is hiding her identity. She is hiding her true name, right? She is hiding everything about her this entire story. Many different ways to look at Esther also as a character inside the Megillah, but she's also very much hiding. Now, there is a decree, all single women, right, all women who have not been married will come to the palace, and Achashverosh will spend the night with each, and there will be a beauty pageant of some sort that he will evaluate and choose the next queen. Every single one of them goes and hides her natural beauty by doing about a year of treatments, 6 months bathing in perfume, right? And 6 months in a different kind of oil. There's 2 different oils they go into just a fun fact, makes your skin green. So gives you a greenish tint.
It's a streak or something else?
No, like an olive.
Mushrooms?
Huh? So Achashverosh clearly had a thing for green women. The question is how green, right? But different cultures have different standards of beauty. For some reason, this was what was considered the standard of beauty, and that was deemed for royalty, had to do with being for 6 months in one oil and 6 months in another one, in bathing that would change, from like a scientific point of view, it would change the color of your skin. It would change the tint to a greenish tint. I don't know if that's helpful for anyone, but it's there.
They became the She-Hulk.
Yeah, it's like Chloe Swivel.
Yeah.
So-
Great.
So then you have that. So everyone goes through this process, and everyone is required to basically gets what every woman would be able to ask for whatever she wants, any piece of jewelry, any garment, whatever she would like to wear to go into the king. And Esther goes in as she is with her simple clothes, without going through this whole process, right? Like without her doing anything extra more than she is commanded to do. And Achashverosh picks her. Now, fourth character. We have Mordechai. Mordechai is a character who is in the background. He is pushing and motivating Esther, guiding her throughout the entire story. He is her uncle who's adopted her when she was orphaned. And there are multiple different opinions of who he is. Option number one is he is one of the big rabbis of the Sanhedrin. This is why he understands all these languages and is able to catch the plot of when the two king's guards decide that they want to execute the king. This is why he is so involved. This is why possibly he refuses to bow down to Haman, as he is one of the great rabbis and what he would do to impact the generation. Other opinions look at him in the opposite direction and say he is an assimilated Jew. Okay? His name, Mordechai, comes from the name Marduk, that was a Persian god, and him or his parents, right? Either just like we have different names that we are using to describe people, like Esther, that is clearly not her name, right? Or if you go into the story of Ruth, that's a lot more interesting as far as names go. You have every single person's name pretty much tells you about their personality, right? Orpah, the sister-in-law, is called Orpah because she turns her neck to Ruth and Naomi, right? You go, no one named their daughter turned her neck, right? You have Machlon and Kilion, their husbands who die, right? Which means diseased and died prematurely, right? No one named their child died prematurely or died from disease, right? Like those weren't their names. That is what we remember them as. So the question is, was Mordechai from an assimilated family that went to Achashverosh's party, that was already in that path, or was Mordechai himself assimilating, and he is now in this process of becoming a different person? So if you pick any single character and follow their storyline and their storyline only, you will have a very different story of the Megillah. The story from the perspective of Mordechai with that kind of approach is you have a generation of assimilated Jews that are now going towards extinction, right? There is some case of something that's happening over here, a Holocaust that didn't happen, right? But the decrees are all there. And his rise up in becoming a Jewish leader, him and his niece, changing the course of history, right? If you look from Esther's perspective, you're looking at a girl who avoided the spotlight, right? At all costs, right? Like she is trying to go unnoticed as much as possible, but there is a goal that needs to happen, and we'll get to that for sure, right? Like there's no way to around that, right? But that she has a goal, or God has a goal for her, that something needs to happen, and she is going to be the vessel in which that is going to happen in, right? This is something that Mordechai later on tells her that if you don't do it, someone else will, right? God will save us. You have an opportunity to be the vessel that God will save the Jewish people through, or you will be erased from the history books, right? You and your family, and God will find another way because we are not disappearing today. Okay? So, yeah.
I want to ask about the name. Esther.
Yes.
Hadassah?
Hadassah.
So it's the first time that I know that her name was Hadassah.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking it's odd, no? It's like it's even a little bit rude. She did so many and we didn't know her name even. Just
So it's in the Megillah. It says, "Vehu omen et Hadassah, he Esther bat Dodo." Right? So he is taking care of this girl named Hadassah, who is now being referred to as Esther, the daughter of his cousin. Right? Like the word that it used for bat Dodo, right, in biblical terms means it's actually, it's funny, it's very African. Right? It's the entire generation. You look at it and say, all of your brothers, right? Like my generation to my children would all be referred to as the same level, right?
not like
I don't have a good terminology to use for it, but it's you would refer to your uncle the same words you would use to describe your father, right? So the son of your brother is your cousin. It's all so it's very, very biblical the way that is described.
But we know that the name that
Yeah.
you have the name that the parents give you, it's so important.
Yeah,
The energy,
100%.
you change it in a story.
The question is, why is her name changed? Why is her name
No,
changed?
I understand because it's Esther and she's hiding whatever.
The entire story is hidden. That's what that's what we're going to be getting at. Is the entire story of the Megillah, of all of Purim, is hiding in plain sight.
But we not honoring her by saying Esther.
As opposed to Hadassah.
Yeah, this is what I'm thinking.
Right.
So,
So the question is Esther her name, right? Right, like your name is Lilach and Libi,
Yeah.
right? But it's Lilach.
yeah,
However, you introduce yourself as Libi
a lot.
a lot, right? Is that not dishonoring your parents, dishonoring you? That you are going and using a name that was not given to you.
Maybe, but in those days it's different than other days.
I don't necessarily agree that it's different. I think that if you understand that names are important, the names are always going to be important,
Yeah.
right? Esther, I think Esther is a title of the story, not necessarily how we were referring to her as her name.
Esther was like a position.
In what way?
Esther was like a position. Mordecai was kind of leader. So
You're
Esther
saying as a
was
position,
cer-
as a position.
Esther was like position because through her the Jewish people will be saved. Because Mordecai has got the king to sign decrees so that he can, I'm going to put it this way, murder out all the Jewish people. Haman was a problem. He wanted to extinguish the Jewish people. So Esther was like a position.
So this is what Mordecai refers to later on,
Rabbi.
right? He does go directly to what you're saying and saying, who knows if this is the entire reason you got here,
That's
right? As the position,
She
right?
had a position and she had the choice to be part of the saving of the Jewish people.
Rabbi, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
You know the world of Tahu?
The what?
The world of Tahu?
No.
Oh.
In what? Oh, the world of like Tohu before existence.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, would it be possible that she had a big shard of that world?
I think that when you're
And
getting
she was
into
the vessel.
Kabbalah, that's a whole other conversation, right? Of what is before creation, we're putting aside. I would say again, if we have brought this up as like a part of other conversations of free will. Yeah, so of free will and God knowing everything, right? Like those are two things that keep on coming up. So there are different opinions in Jewish theology and philosophy. How much does God know versus how much free will do we have? Because if God knows everything, then could we have free will? That is part of the big discussion of this story, right? And of a lot of other things. I would say the story of the Megillah is a Holocaust that never happened, right? How many Holocausts never happened in Judaism? It's an endless amount, right? It's the amount of times that those who wanted us to be annihilated and failed before it started, right? You know, you have there's a concept that people haven't heard of a lot, but it's called a second Purim, and it is a Purim for specific communities, right? So there's Purim of Cairo, Purim of the bandits in Turkey, right? Purim of Crete. So all different places that basically there was a decree to wipe out all the Jews because of whatever blood libels were happening. And then something happened. So in Cairo, this is about 300 years ago or 400 years ago, there was a decree to kill all of the Jews. And then the night before the decree was supposed to come out, one of the ministers of the king, of the sultan, assassinated him. Had nothing to do with us. Yeah. It was some sort of coup that was happening, and all Jews were saved. That date was celebrated as a second Purim for the Jews of Cairo, right? So the entire story of Purim is things that this story specifically we heard of, we know of, we tell it all the time. But how many of these things do not happen, right? Like, do we not know about that they happen? So in that discussion of free will versus God knowing everything, you have very extreme opinions. You have God does not know everything, right? God has given up that ability to know everything so that we could have free will. I don't like that opinion. Mm-hmm. There's a worse opinion, right? Which is we don't have free will, therefore God knows everything, right? This is one specific opinion. This is by the Ralbag, and he is the only one who holds by this, and I do not like that opinion either. There is the opinion of Maimonides that says God knows everything, and we have free will, and they happen at the same exact time because God knows all of the possibilities that can possibly come. You have an infinite amount of options, right? I can go right, I can go left, right? I cannot start to fly, right? I build a plane, now I can fly, right? What is my limitations as far as my free will? It's all inside possibilities. So when you are playing chess against a computer, the opening moves you have altogether 20 moves. You can move each pawn once, right? Each pawn twice, or the horse 2 times, which means I have started out with a possibility of 20 options. That's free will. I can do whatever I want. I cannot take the rook and move it to the other side of the board if there's something blocking it. At that point, I have created a certain amount of options. Then I move another piece. I have started new options. The computer knows all the possibilities and does not know what I'm going to do, right? That is Maimonides' understanding of free will. He didn't use the word computers or chess, right? But that is Maimonides' understanding of free will versus the fact that God knows everything. Later on, for anyone who is interested in metaphysics, there's a book called The Adventures of Flatland, about a two-dimensional being that interacts with a three-dimensional being, right? So it's basically a world that is on a piece of paper. There is a square, there's a circle, there's a triangle, right? All the flat objects. And they can interact with each other, and they are aware of everything in the world that is in a second dimension and a first dimension, which is the dot. That's it. Nothing else is in existence. One day, the square is out and is wandering on the page, right? Very, very flatly. And there is a person who interacts with this square on the page. And he says, "Hello down there in Flatland." And the square says, "Who are you?" Right? There is this booming voice that I hear that is shaking the page, right? The world is trembling, but I can't interact with this. So this interaction goes back and forth, and the square says, "Show me who you are," right? So the human puts his hand down on the page, and what happens? Now the square can go and explain to his friends that he has talked to a third-dimensional being, and the third-dimensional being is 5 small circles and 1 big circle. That is God, right? It is so much bigger than we are. It's 5 small circles and 1 big circle, and it can move freely. But is that a human? Just what is on the surface? No, so you press your face on it, and you are a big squiggly line, right? But you can only observe what is on the flat surface. There are no other dimensions, right? So this is not a religious book. This is a metaphysical book. Right? It's a mathematical understanding of dimensions. But this is in a way kind of understanding our interaction with God. God is above us, and we can only ever use words that we can understand. We personify God. Right? We take God and we say God's right arm and, his anger from his nose, right? Charon apo, right? God's sight, God's taste, right? The smell of the korbanot is nice for God. It calms his stomach, right? Like it's words that we use because we don't have words for anything beyond us. In that interaction, you can see the endless possibilities, right? You put a stick man on that page. He can go right, he can go left, he can go up, he can go down. He cannot leave the page, right? So you can see all the possibilities without ever limiting what that person can do. So God knows all, and there's free will. But what if something needs to happen? Mashiach needs to come. Jews need to go back to Israel, right? Now, these are what Maimonides refers to as set points in time, things that must happen, and they will happen in one way or another. You get to choose. Okay? So in the you get to choose kind of scenario, let's go with a horrible one. Jews need to go back to Israel. There's no question about it. We've been in exile for 2,000 years. Things get bad, they get bad. There's assimilation. We have to go back to Israel. Okay, how are you going to choose to do it? Are you going to go with the students of the Gaon of Vilna, the students of the Baal Shem Tov, the first 4 aliyot, or are you waiting for a Holocaust, right? Because something needs to move you to get there. Are you going from free will, from I want to go? Or are you going because you have no other choice, right? This is what we refer to all the time as Chavlei Mashiach, right? The contractions of Mashiach being born, right? Which means there's always pain in giving birth. There's always something that is going to be moving, that's going to push and say, now it's time, right? There's a physical, right, a biological need to push because your body is saying now, right? Now there's 2 ways that baby comes out. There is a natural, beautiful way, or there's an emergency C-section, right? There's the way that if you read the signs and know that if you don't leave, right, then you have Holocaust, pogroms, Bondi Beach, right?
Mm.
Everything that will basically tell you you need to go, right? South African Jews had the warning signs over and over and over and over again, right? Until it's in a situation where people say, if we don't leave now, right, we're going to get slaughtered, right? And these things happen in every community at one point or another in history. People say, we need to go. And you can go because it's time, or you can wait till it's too late and God will save you anyway, right? And push the to where it needs to go. With that, Esther is a fixed point in time, right? There is a Holocaust that could happen, that shouldn't happen, right? But it needs to happen for a reason, right? Everything happens for a reason. So, in the story of what is happening, is there is a decree that we need to do something. The next generation is the generation that goes back and builds the second temple, which means there is a decree in heaven that something needs to happen. People need to start moving.
And build a temple.
And build a temple, right? There's something dramatic that's about to happen. But instead of getting ready and prepared for spiritual elevation, instead of looking around and saying, what can I do to get closer to God, to move myself in that direction, we only hear about this situation where basically all of the rabbis of the generation and all of the leaders of the generation go to Achashverosh's meal and sit there and join him at the feast and say, if the king invites us, we should go. And if he's going to be taking out the menorah and lighting it in front of us, we will still celebrate because it's the diplomatic thing to do, right? It's a diplomatic thing to do, to always be polite wherever you're at. So if you are being colonized, occupied, you've been displaced, doesn't matter, right? We'll go. And Mordechai is either with them, according to one opinion, or against them in the other opinion, right? Again, every single opinion, the way that you're going to read it, is going to change drastically how we see the story. Every single step we have, you can look at it and say, God is pushing, and you can say, it's just happening. So let's continue for a second. We have Esther marries Achashverosh. Mordechai tells Esther that 2 guards are planning to kill the king. She tells them it is written down in the memory book, right? In the Chronicles of the Kingdom. Haman gets elevated. Mordechai refuses to bow down. Haman says, I'm going to kill all the Jews. Haman goes and buys that right from Achashverosh, from the king, by determining that he's going to kill them at random. Okay, this is in there as well. That it says with a pool, with a raffle, right? So whether he rolls dice, throws darts to hit a random date in the calendar, okay, or picks a date out of the hat, right, is irrelevant. He wants to show that our death will be random. Okay? This is because who is Aman? What is his ancestry? From what nation? Agag, Amalek, right? Agag is the king of Amalek, and he is Haman Ha'agagi. He is the direct descendant of the Amaleki king. The Amalekim are the one nation that attacked us for no reason whatsoever. Why did they attack us, right? So what are reasons for war? In all of history. Land, we have no land. Religion, we have no religion, right? We were freed from slavery 5 seconds ago. And riches. To the world's knowledge, we have no riches, right? We did get stuff from Egypt, but the majority after the splitting of the sea, when they die, there's no world knowledge that we are a nation that has anything, and they don't come and attack us from the front, they attack us from the back, right? They go and they attack the elders, the women, the children, the sick, right? They're attacking those. They're not coming from in front where the soldiers are. They're attacking from the back. And when they do this, there is a large historical archaeological discussion of why they would, right? Like, what's the motivation? Pure evil is a little bit too easy of an answer, right? Like, I'm just going to attack for anarchy, right? Like, we'll just make the world burn, right? It's too weird of an answer. And there are those who researched the Amaleki nation, their history, everything we can find about them, and found that they also believe in one God, except that they don't believe in free will at all. Which means anything that you do, it's not your fault. You go, you kill, you steal, you rape, no one can ever be upset at you because you had no free will. It was decided already by God that this is what will happen, and therefore I can do what I want. Haman goes and says, I'm going to kill you at random. It turns out 11 months from the story of the Megillah, right? There's almost a year in between. This story is happening around Pesach when he rolls the dice, and it happens Purim the next year. Purim is called Purim because of the pool, the lottery that Haman does, right? To show the exact opposite of what we believe is the world is random, and the answer is no, the world is not random, the world is governed. So Haman goes and he decides that he's going to kill the Jews at random. Mordechai hears this, and he sits in it with a sackcloth outside of the palace. Esther hears about this. There's the interaction back and forth, and she tells Mordechai, go and gather all of the Jews, which is a very, very powerful pasuk. Haman describes us as a divided nation, and at that point we are being picked off one at a time, and she says, go and bring all of the Jews together, which is the unity of it all, and from that point on, our story completely changes, right? So just keeping that in mind as well. And then Esther goes and tells Achashverosh. She goes to the king, and she tells Mordechai, she says, I haven't been called into the king for over a month now, right? That's not a good sign for a queen, that she has fallen out of favor with the king, and if you go into the throne room, you will be executed, right? Like, there is no way around this. This is not going to end well. Mordechai tells her, in my opinion, the most important pasuk in the entire Haggadah, and says, do not try to hide. Umi yodea im la'et hazot higat lamalchut. And who knows if the entire reason you became queen was for this moment. So take it a step further. Not that you became queen, that you were born was for this moment. Let's take it a step further. Not only that you were born, but that your parents and grandparents, your entire tribe only existed for this one moment, right? And this goes to a very important Jewish ideal that everybody should carry in their pants, right? You should have two pockets, two metaphorical pockets. You don't need to actually have these. But in each pocket, you should have a note. Again, metaphorical note. But they should each have one pasuk. The first one is, Bishvili nivra ha'olam. The world was created for me, completely. You are the pinnacle of creation. I'm not saying this to exaggerate. Every single person here is the pinnacle of creation, and all of your ancestors everything they did was to make sure that you will be right now sitting in this room, right? Not even your entire life, this exact moment, right? And if you start thinking about your life like that, you start realizing that every single moment could be extremely precious and extremely important to all those who came beforehand. The other one is V'anochi afar va'efer, and I am nothing but dust. That balance is, who am I, right? I'm a chain and a link. In the grand scheme of history, no one will remember me, right? Unless I eat the Mona Lisa, then someone will remember me, right? Like, you got to do something dramatic. Otherwise, people will forget you eventually, right? And I'm everything. That balance is a very hard balance to hold. And people usually hold one stronger than the other, right? Depends on your personality, how Polish you are, or, how millennial you are. But, there's that balance in the world. And when we stop and we say, if Esther stops and thinks about it and says, she says, I'm going to die, right? Going into the king is the last thing that I should be doing now. It is the wrong strategy. It's a bad move. It is everything instinctively is telling her, avoid this. And he says, this could be the entire reason of your existence, right? Think about that. She says, okay, I'm going to do it, right? Now, again, I do encourage people to always try to think about it from that perspective. Who knows why you're here? You never know. You never know for what conversation, for what person you're going to make what difference. We all would like to think that we're the main character in our own story, but not necessarily that we are, right? It could be that our job is to do something greater for someone else. And that person will go and discover a cure for cancer, right? But you being the right person in the right place, right? Because we can't all be the main characters for everything, but us doing that, right? So keeping those two in balance, in check all the time. Esther goes to the king, and I'm going a little bit from the Midrash point of view. It says that she walks in, Achashverosh is on the other side of the throne room, the archers are there, right, pointing their bows and arrows at Esther's head, right? Like, this is a death sentence. And she needs to touch the scepter, right? He holds a scepter, and he needs to decide, is he extending the scepter or not, right? The Sharvita Zahav, is he going to extend it or not? And the Midrash says that while he is trying to decide, does he have favor with Esther, does Esther have favor with him or not, the scepter extends itself until her, right? That's the first time that we're talking about something in a more miraculous way, right? And he says, what can I give you? Ask for anything. She asks for a meal, right? A date night. Her, Achashverosh, and Haman. Now, why Haman? Haman has a secret plot, because he, again, is not what he seems to be. Haman would like to be king. So, he tries to have his daughter become queen. It failed, right? He first had the queen executed. Then he tried to have his daughter become queen. Then after he tried to have his daughter become queen, now he is always in the king's ear and keeps on trying to. So, the next scene right after that, after they have their meal, Haman goes home. He's a king of the world, top of the world, an extra spring in his step. He's had the best day ever. The queen is finally taking a liking to him. She's been kind of aloof up until now, but now she's taking a liking to him, and she invited him back for a meal also tomorrow. That's a really good sign for Haman, so he thinks. We won't spoil it for him that it's not the best meal for him. But he goes out, he sees Mordechai, he gets upset, goes back to his wife. His wife gives him great advice: build a gallows, hang him, right, and then you'll be happy. Achashverosh cannot sleep, and when he can't sleep, he tries to figure out what to do. They read from his book, and he realizes, Mordechai never did anything good for him. Haman, who has no tact whatsoever, comes in the middle of the night to disturb the king's sleep, and when he walks in to the king's bedroom, the king says, what should I do for someone who I hold dear? Haman says he's got to be talking about me, right? Like, there is no way he's talking about anyone else. So what should I ask for? I'm literally being told, ask for what you want. He says, okay, take the king's horse and the king's royal clothes and a crown. Let's throw that in as well. And have one of your highest ministers take him around town, screaming on top of his lungs, this is who the king loves, right? In other words, everybody will see me as king. Right? I've got this. And the king says, okay, go do that to Mordechai. Right? Like, there's no bigger kick in the stomach for that. Right? So he goes, he takes Mordechai, and he carries him around. It says that Haman comes back into his house, avel v'chafui rosh, that he is mourning and he is like filthy. Right? So the Midrash says, why did that happen? Is his daughter, the one who he wanted to marry the king, right, saw that there's someone on the horse that's got to be her father, and there's someone that is carrying him that must be Mordechai, right? Her dad must have gotten everything she wants, so she throws the garbage out of the window onto him, and then she gets who it is, and she jumps out of the window and kills herself. So he's dirty and mourning. Just more midrashim. Okay, a lot of midrashim in Esther. Yeah. Esther is fun with midrashim. Then he comes to the next party, right? He's like rushed into the next party, which he is told, right? Esther tells the king in front of Haman, Haman wants to kill me and all of my people. And it says that the king doesn't respond, right? You're like, this is a king that either, right, like, he's a king who's killed his queen before, so not unexpected that he would kill his queen to save his favorite minister. He's also a king who, according to some, has a ton of blood on his hands, and having his minister, his prime minister, trying to kill his queen is not a very good reputation, so killing him isn't a bad idea. But he gets up and he leaves, right? Which is an odd thing for Achashverosh, because he's an impulsive person. He gets up and he leaves to go and breathe, right? Like, cool down. And it says he goes and he gets upset in the garden. So the Midrash says there are workers in the garden chopping down his beautiful garden, right? These are angels that are chopping down his beautiful garden. And he asks him, he says, what are you doing? He says, Haman told us to do this. So now he's upset at Haman also outside. He can't even get a fresh air. He goes back in and it says, and Haman is falling on Esther's bed, right? So falling repetitively, right? So again, the Midrash says Haman tries to beg for his life. He gets up and the angel pushes him back on the bed with. A different opinion says Esther pulls Haman down on the bed with her, right? To basically, this is a suicide mission, right? Esther realizes the only way to get rid of the decree will be to get rid of Haman. I am going to actually die, which is what she tells Mordechai. I'm going to die. What is she going to do? She's going to go down with the boat. She's going to take Haman with her and basically have the king execute both of them, right? And the king takes Haman, right? Like, the king is like, are you also trying to take the queen in my own palace, right? And then someone walks in and says, oh, and by the way, Haman made a tree, right? Hang Haman on the tree. Let's leave that as the end of the story. There's more later on in chapters 8, 9, and 10, right? But that is the story. Now, you could read this entire story, and you will notice that God is not mentioned once in any form, right? We have hundreds of names for God, right? Some that are obvious, some that are not. There is not a single mention of God in this story. If you read the entire Tanakh, there isn't a single book in Tanakh that does not have God's name, at least one of God's names, right? The story of Esther does not have God's name at all, because God is hiding in this story as well. There is so much to unpack with that, but this, for me, is again the prayer of Modim, right? We say, Al nisecha shebechol yom imanu. We thank you, God, for the miracles that you do for us all the time. There are miracles we know about. The splitting of the sea. Classic, right? That is a classic miracle. When people think of miracles, they think Kriyat Yam Suf, right? Like, that's a nes. But what about the story that we are reading, right? We've got Purim, then we have Pesach. Pesach is obvious miracles. We have the 10 plagues, then we have the splitting of the sea. It's all just miracle after miracle after miracle, right? You got to be blind not to see them. The story of Purim is a more important story, in a way, than the story of Pesach. So much so that Purim is the holiest day of the year. Purim, I'll repeat it, because it is worth repeating. Purim is the holiest day of the year. People often think Yom Kippur is the holiest day of the year. These people are wrong. No, there are opinions about that. But Yom Kippur, okay, is even referred to as Kippurim. Like Purim. It is almost like Purim. Purim has a whole different level to it. Why is Purim so unbelievable? Because Purim is the celebration, the miracles that we do not see. When we would ask Jews, Israelites, in the time of Yetziat Mitzrayim, in the time of the Exodus, where is God? It's a very simple answer. We've heard him speak at Har Sinai. We've seen what he's done to the Egyptians. This doesn't stop them from worshiping a golden calf. This doesn't stop them from doing other things. But there is very, very clear God's guidance in the world. When you ask the Jews of the generation of Purim, where is God? They would give you the same exact answer. And if you read the story of Megillah as a completely secular Jew, you would say, it's really simple. This king didn't like his queen. He killed her, got a new queen. That queen happened to be of a nation that the prime minister wanted to exterminate. She begged him not to. He didn't. End of story. There are no miracles here, right? There is nothing to celebrate. The genocide didn't even happen, right? Like, there is nothing to celebrate in Purim. Like, really, really nothing. Or you can stop and say, every single step of the way is guided, and every single step of the way, the fact that the king couldn't sleep that specific night, and he opens up the book, and it so happens to fall out of all of the stories, the story of Mordechai. Out of thousands of women, this is Achashverosh's taste, right? Like, specifically, he wants Esther, right? That out of everything, Haman needs to fixate on Mordechai, who could possibly be an assimilated Jew in and of himself, but refuses to bow down because Haman has declared himself, according to that same opinion, as a god, and therefore Mordechai, that was Mordechai's awakening, is going, I will not bow down to people, right? Like, and this is his journey back to Judaism, right? Every single point in that story, you can read in two different ways or more, right? But you can read in at least two different ways. And this is what I feel like we should be celebrating on Purim, is the miracles that we don't see, the unbelievable understanding that we are alive today and that our heart is beating the right beats per minute, right? And that we're getting enough oxygen in, and that we can go to the bathroom, and all of these things that we take for granted until we don't have them, and then we really learn to appreciate what we had and when it's too late, right? So while we have things, and as I mentioned in the Modani class, we woke up, it's a wonderful thing. Everything else afterwards is a bonus. So we're going to start with that. We're going to start to learn to appreciate every moment that we have. We're going to take our lives seriously. And we're going to stop and say, it doesn't matter at what point we are in our lives. It doesn't matter what we've been doing up until now. It could be that right now my entire existence and the existence of all those who've come before me has led to this moment. Okay? And I'll finish with a story that's in Israel's archives as a story that was that fundamental to the state of Israel. Ben Gurion was offered, some of you may have heard me, Ben Gurion was offered a partition plan by the British Mandate. And they said, we'll give this to the Jews, we'll give this to the Muslims, right? Like, here's going to be the division plan. And he went to his forming cabinet, right? Like, there was no state of Israel at that point, right? But they were forming a cabinet, and he sits there with them, and he says, what do you think? In that cabinet, there was a man who, I'm really bad with names, he was Russian from the kibbutz movement, one of the fathers of the kibbutz movement, and he asks him, he says, what do you think? And he says, let me get back to you tomorrow. I need to advise with some people. And he comes back the next day and he says, we cannot accept this plan. He says, why not? He says, this is not something that we can do, period, right? Like, this is not a good plan for us. And he says, who did you advise with? And he says, I've advised with my grandfather who has since passed, and I've advised with my grandson who hasn't been born yet, right? Every single step, you think all the generations that came before you, right, that sacrificed everything so that you can have the life you have today, what do we owe them? And possibly, more importantly, all the generations that will come after us, what do we owe them? Right? Everything that you do, all the big decisions that you make, decide where to live, that impacts future generations, right? Like, I'm going to use the Nathan family as an example, right? Like, Nathans came to New Zealand, right? That impacted generations. Didn't only impact your family, impacted everybody that's at the table, right? And that has to do with a family that made a decision, right? A family that made a decision to move to Israel that makes an impact for generations, right? All of those things help you make real life decisions. Am I doing justice to those who came before me? Am I doing justice to those who will come after me? And that is the story of Purim. From a very different perspective.